A side, B side, what side are you on?
Well, hello, howdy, how do you do, Adam? It is another episode of A Side B Side Podcast.
It is. I am excited. It is a gloomy, rainy day in Minnesota, so I've been looking forward to the podcast recording being my bright spot of the day, as it often is. So, very glad it is here.
I think we have sent the rains. The rains are not falling down in Africa; they were falling down in Nevada, and I think we have passed them on to Minnesota.
Yeah, it's been sadly gloomy. My dog has given me lots of looks like, "What? Why? How could you do this to me?" And I'm like, I apologize. I cannot fix the rain. It really sucks.
So this week in the news, of course, the biggest story we know, of course, is still Alec Baldwin and that tragic accident that literally came out right after we recorded last week. So that is why we didn't talk about it last week. It wasn't like we were trying to ignore it or avoid it. It was just like literally we recorded on Wednesday, and then like Wednesday night or Wednesday afternoon, Thursday is when it broke. So we weren't like willfully ignoring that story.
No, it just, timing is weird, and it just seems like every day there's a new piece of information that comes out that just makes everybody look bad.
I know. I mean, you've got the the assistant director that handled it, and then he was supposed to check it, and he was like, yeah, it's all good, and he was like, oh wait, no, I really didn't check it. And then he was fired from another set for an incident very similar, but fortunately no one was hurt in that incident. But I mean, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, we all, like, when you do things a lot, it's easy to like forget, whether it's putting on your seatbelt or whatever. We all have stuff that we do all the time that we get lax on.
Mm-hmm.
But when it involves, a weapon, you'd really hope that that's the one person that never lets up,
Right. You're hoping that's the one person that doesn't get lax in their job. So apparently they are considering no charges are off the table yet, even to include Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, I don't know the rules.
That feels wrong, but
yeah, but also I mean, whenever I've been in a theater production that had a weapon, or the one movie set that I was on way back when, I was an extra in Sugar and Spice, which is the movie about the high school cheerleaders. One of them gets pregnant and they rob a bank branch gas station.
Right.
I was an extra in the grocery store when the bank branch gets robbed, and there was there was like a prop gun and gunfire that went off, and there were the little, what I don't know if they're called, like the caps, but the spliffs or anything that were set up at various spots, because this guy walks up and starts firing and doesn't hit anything, but he hits like all the impulse items at the cash register, right? So there were these little things all set up, but the amount, like they shot that scene probably 10 15 times with the spliffs going off and the cap gun. But there were, and this is, I mean, forgive my memory if I don't have it perfect, it was 22 years ago, 21 years ago, but there were people there that is like checking the gun, carrying the gun, checking this was. There were like safety people that were on it, and then making sure that like all the extras couldn't get too close to the spliffs, and the gun, when it was not on action, was like held in a separate spot, even though it was a cap gun. And like the amount of time and energy that they spent in making sure things were safe, it's like there are rules and they take it very seriously. So it's really disappointing to hear that was not something that was happening on this set.
Yeah, apparently they said that it was in a safe. It did have blanks in it because everybody said it was supposed to have blanks in it. It did have blanks in it, but it also had live rounds. And then the armorer had said she had checked it before it was put in the safe, but other people had access to the safe. So, I mean, it's just a crazy, crazy situation, and it's unfortunate. And someone amazing, from all accounts, has lost their life, and the director, critically injured. And Alec Baldwin, he tragic accident, and it's just all around a bad situation.
Yeah. And why do you have real bullets anyway?
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Why would you bring
why do
live
you need
bullets on
them
a
at
set?
all? Yeah. That just I don't I mean that doesn't seem like that's the thing that even needs why add that to the mix if it's not even on set?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean maybe there's a part of movie magic that I don't know of that needs live bullets. But woof.
I know as a result of this, The Rookie, which I love that show, has stopped using live rounds. Like immediately, they said, "Nope, no more, no need for it. I'm not going to do it."
Yeah. I mean that's with everything we can do with CGI, and it's like, do we really even need that anymore?
Yeah, yeah. Um, the only thing I really watched, I told you I watched Squid Game, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
still haven't seen it. I'm behind on a lot of stuff. I've been working extra, and like then this week I just decided to start rewatching Warehouse 13, which is 12 years old and one of my shows I go back to because I enjoy. But yeah, I have so much I need to start. So Squid Game, you liked
Yeah.
it?
Yes. 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 Absolutely. Um, and I may have said this to you before, but I guess it does bear repeating. When you watch it, do not watch the English dub. Watch its original Korean language with English subtitles.
I think that should always be in my opinion, that's how you should always watch films in a foreign language.
I
Because
agree.
even if you don't know the meaning of the word, the sound and how it's said
Mm-hmm.
can carry so much information.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And the English dub apparently is really bad, and it kind of changes the film from what I've been told.
Well, yeah, and if you spend like, I feel like people are like, well, if I have to read, it pulls me out of the film. I'm like, I don't know, the reading part. I mean, I watch most of my shows with subtitles on because I always feel like you catch stuff you wouldn't
Exactly.
catch.
I do too. I do too. So it doesn't really bother me. And there was one point in time where I was like in the middle of something and I was about to start playing it because I was so into the subtitles. And then I had to remind myself, I don't actually speak Korean, so I might need to pay attention because that's how like into it I was. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna watch this while I'm doing this. And I was like, wait, no, I don't speak. No, I actually need to read the subtitles.
I gotta sit down and focus.
Yeah, but I was just so into it, like
Maybe on like the fourth or fifth time, you could just have it on.
right, right. I know this scene. I know what they're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. I mean, in how many sci-fi films are TV how the alien learns the English language? So why could it not work for us with other languages?
Well, and I have been told that because like I've been working on my Spanish and like pretty much every native Spanish speaking person I've talked to is like put on Spanish television.
Yeah, I love watching soccer in Spanish.
Mm-mm.
Because just there's an excitement level.
Yeah.
But
And
not even just the goals, but just like it's always building towards that goal moment where they yell. But like just like a basic pass is more interesting
mm-hmm.
than, and that's probably because I'm watching like British commentators or like Latin American commentators, and there's like a level of excitement in their voice that's different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that either one is bad or good, but I think
no, it's just different. It's just different.
Yeah.
We understand. We get it.
Yeah.
I did finally watch Black Widow, so I finally have watched all Marvel. I don't know why I kept putting it off. Yes, I do. I'm not huge into Scarlett Johansson, so I was like,
but I mean, Florence Pugh is maybe the best thing in that movie.
She killed that role. Let me
tell you. So good. I've watched it 3 times since it came out on Disney Plus, and it's gotten to be because I've got the 3 TV set up, and I've always got like one of the TVs set on something I've seen before because I just have it running as like a comfort level. Yeah, and it's very much in my rotation, and I've started like quoting like the whole line of this would be a really cool way to die.
All right. That and like, not that this is a spoiler because it's not, it's just a funny plot point. Her in this freaking vest. And I'm like,
oh yeah. It's a really cool vest.
I want a vest with pockets. Like,
Yeah.
but yes,
Yeah,
Florence Pugh she was awesome in it. And like, I had heard she was upset because there wasn't like a Halloween character based on her character in the movie. And I was like, man, I could see that because she
yeah.
killed it.
Well, she's a really good follow on Instagram, and because she
She
does
is amazing on Instagram.
yeah, and so she had posted like a vine, not a vine. What do they call
Story.
them? A story or a reel. A reel. It's on Instagram. Okay. It's a reel, and she had posted one where she's standing in front of like a Halloween shop, and it's got Red Guardian, which is David Harbour in the movie. He's great as well.
Yes.
Everyone does a really good job.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one of Red Guardian, there's one of Black Widow, but there is no Yelena costume, and she's just kind of standing there like with her hands up, like what the heck.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be a Yelena costume because
absolutely.
she killed that. But that's really the only new thing I have seen this week because I have had family in town, so
Are you interested in watching the new Dune?
I am planning on it. I think I'm going to wait until Tuesday because it's $5 movies. So I think I will go treat myself on Tuesday and see Dune.
That is a good plan. It's also on the HBO Max.
Is it? Yeah. Oh, it is. But I have heard that it's one that you should see in theater. So
yeah, that's what I've heard too. I've been debating because I was like, I've literally almost started it 3 times.
Yeah.
But one time it was like, ooh, 2.5 hours. Oh, I should probably sleep today. Or the other time I was like, man, it's supposed to be like this big epic space adventure. That really feels like it needs a bigger screen than I have. So
yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at too. I got to get to the theater.
So, do you have anything for this week?
For the A side, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, our fun intro of catching everybody up for the week.
I've started watching Warehouse 13 again. I watched a movie that I was convinced when it came out should have come out in the 1990s. And then when I saw it pop up on Amazon Prime this week, I was convinced it was from the 1990s, but it's actually from like 2012. And that is the action flick with Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz called Night and Day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it was like should have been out in like 1999.
Well, you know how sometimes movies come out like in pairs, like they're like the same exact thing, but like 2 different casts. Because there was an Ashton Kutcher one that came out like right about the same time. And I can't think of the name of it right now, but it was like a very similar premise. And I remember they came out like right about the same time. And I was like, this is the same movie. Because he did that with Friends with Benefits and the other one that like Justin Timberlake was in too. Killers. It's Killer. I think it's Killers.
Oh, the Killers is the actual one. Now I'm trying to think of the.
And then No Strings Attached is the.
No Strings Attached, which was with Mila Kunis.
Yeah.
So thereby having even more Ashton Kutcher connections.
Mm-hmm. So now this is an Ashton Kutcher podcast, apparently.
Evidently. Yeah, 2000. Wow. It's amazing to think 2010, 2011 is a decade ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is when that happened way too fast.
I know.
But yeah, that's my big stuff. I've been doing a lot of work lately, which is fun. But that means I don't have as much time to watch things. I've had some really good conversations with people about our podcast lately.
Oh, wow.
Whether it's people texting or via social media. So that's been fun too, because then I sometimes remember what I actually said on the podcast and have to defend it. Because people are like, I can't believe you said this. And I'm like, did I say that?
I didn't say that. Oh, I guess I did say that.
Because I know people are going to find this hard to believe, but there's no script. A lot of this is, I know it sounds very planned out, but a lot of this is just, off the top of the head, two people having a conversation. So I don't remember everything that I say. Just want to toss that out there for plausible deniability.
That's not going to work. You're still going to get held to it.
Yeah, but it's been a lot of fun, and those are always welcome. It brightens
absolutely.
my day. when I get those messages or anything that we can. And I'm happy to debate with you about any film or movie that you like, because that's what my life is, just basically talking about media and complaining at times.
Oh, all right. So are you ready for this week?
I am ready. I mean, it is Halloween. It is the last week of October, my least favorite month of the year. So let's do some more killing and get on to some turkey.
All right. All right. So this week we're back to our men. Last week we did a female. So this week we are back to the men because, well, there's much more of them.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there are a lot of male serial killers and true crime invested people.
Yeah. So this week we're talking about Herbert Mullin. So Herbert William Mullen, he was born on April 8th of 1947. Now I'm going to mention something. Just keep this in mind and we'll get back to it. This is actually the anniversary of the San Francisco earthquake. Like I said, hold on to that, okay?
Okay.
The San Francisco earthquake of 1906, by the way.
Right. Not 1989.
No. So Herbert was born in Salinas, California, but spent a good bit of time in Santa Cruz. His parents were Bill and Jean Mullen, and he had an older sister named Patricia. So Bill was a World War II vet, and this is his dad. Bill, his dad, was a World War II vet, and he was very strict, but not like abusive, because a lot of times we hear about these strict abusive dads. He was just a strict dad, and he often spoke of his war service, which, thank you for your service, sir. Mm-hmm. Herbert had a relatively normal childhood. He had quite a few friends at school, played football, had a steady girlfriend. When I say like had quite a few friends, I mean like a lot. Like he was popular in school. He was even voted most likely to succeed.
Oh, wow. No pressure.
Which is really kind of unusual for our stories.
Yeah. Usually our characters are outcasts or misfits, or they're not the most likely to succeed.
Exactly. So Herbert, he graduated from San Lorenzo High School, but unfortunately, right after graduation, one of his best friends was killed in a car accident. And this car accident, as you would expect, had a huge impact on Herbert. It impacted him so much, though, like he took it his grief went like, and not grief shaming, because everybody grieves differently, but this grief impacted him on a level that he even ended up building a shrine to his friend Dean Richardson in his bedroom.
Oh, wow.
So at this time, Herbert expressed concern that he might possibly be homosexual, and he became obsessed with reincarnation. This is where we mark the start of Herbert's decline. So in 1963, Herbert moved to Santa Cruz with his aunt and uncle, and they were living in a cabin in Boulder Creek, which is an area of Santa Cruz, until his family found a home in Felton, which is another small town in Santa Cruz County. In the fall of 1965, Herbert began studying engineering at Cabrillo College. Well, in the spring of 1966, Herbert bumps into a friend of his friend, Dean. Remember Dean, his friend that passed away?
Yes.
His name was Jim Gianera. So Jim introduces our friend Herbert here to good old Mary Jane, Mary Joanna. So Jim gives Herbert his first marijuana cigarette, which Herbert swears damaged his brain. Of course, we know there is no scientific proof that marijuana kills brain cells.
Right. I thought this was going to turn into a snack food podcast for a second. Herbert then discovered Cheetos.
Herbert said, ooh, Cheetos are the best. Flaming hot ones. I don't think they had those back then, though.
No, I think those are relatively new.
So in June of that year, after finishing his freshman year at Cabrillo, he got a summer job with a road crew and temporarily broke up with his girlfriend, Loretta. That fall, Herbert tries LSD for the first time.
Ooh, that's a little bit more.
That's a big jump.
Yeah, we're not talking about Cheetos anymore.
So we're going to fast forward a few months to January of 1967, and we find Herbert and Loretta not just getting back together, but they go ahead and got engaged. I guess he said, "Baby, I missed you. Need you in my life." The spring of that year, we find Herbert experimenting with drugs. He's still using LSD. He's mixing in marijuana, and he also gains an interest in Eastern religion. In June, he graduates from Cabrillo College with a 2-year engineering degree, and he enrolls himself at San Jose State. Well, then in September, Herbert swears to become a conscientious war objector. You say Vietnam was actually happening at the time. He changed his major to philosophy, and he became a hippie. You know, people throw that term around now, like, oh, he's such a hippie, but it was actually a designation for people at the time.
Yeah. It's a stereotype that has some basis for meaning.
Right. Just like when people say a gypsy or bohemian, they all are stereotypes that derive from an actual group of people. Mm-hmm. So in November, Herbert withdrew from San Jose. You know, side note, and this is totally dumb, but why is it we say herb for the name, but herb for the spices?
English language is an enigma wrapped in a burrito of nonsense.
Okay. All right. I just had to point that out because I'm saying Herbert quite a bit.
Yeah.
So in November, old Herbie withdraws from San Jose, and following through on his promise, in January 1968, he registers as a conscientious objector, and he decides, you know what? I've been thinking about it. I'm going to go ahead and try it. He has his first same-sex encounter.
While he is still engaged, or do you get married by this point?
Still engaged.
Okay. Free love.
So, well, it's funny that you bring that up because in March of that year, 1968, Herbert actually breaks up with Loretta. And this, I think, on top of everything else, just causes things to flare up, and he starts with the violence. So in April, he's arrested for marijuana possession. He pleads to a lesser offense and ends up with probation. He then gets a job at Goodwill Industries and ends up managing a store in San Luis Obispo.
Nice.
So we move forward about a year. Herbert quits his job and announces that he's moving to India to study yoga, presumably at an ashram. But he doesn't actually move to India. He actually moves to Sebastopol, I hope I said that correctly, Sebastopol, California, and lives in a trailer on a ranch owned by his sister Patricia and her husband Albert. Shortly after, in March, at a family dinner, Herbert begins imitating his brother-in-law Richard's every movement. This is known as echopraxia, which is an indication of schizophrenia. His family was able to convince him to go to a mental health hospital, the Mendocino State Hospital. He stayed there for 6 weeks and was diagnosed with schizophrenia, aggravated by drug abuse. He was treated with antipsychotic meds. He checked himself out in May. His prognosis was labeled as poor. So over the course of the next few years, he enters several different institutions, but he would always check himself out after just a very short time. He begins to ritualistically extinguish cigarettes on his penis.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Not where I thought that was going.
No. And ow.
Yeah.
He attempts to enter the priesthood and was evicted from an apartment after he repeatedly pounded on the floor, shouting at the people who weren't actually there.
Oh, that they weren't there. I was like, I've had neighbors that
oh, trust me, I get the loud neighbors because I have some over me now, but he was yelling at people that weren't even there.
Yeah, that's not a good sign.
Right. So in October of 1969, after leaving the last treatment center in Santa Cruz, Herbert moved back home with his parents. He goes to visit his old job, the Goodwill, and he runs into an old manager who had told him, he told that manager that he was hearing voices and receiving messages. He also made advances on a friend that he referred to as Uncle. This gentleman, who happened to be a doctor, recognized this schizophrenic episode and had Herbert involuntarily committed with the help of the sheriff's department. So he's discharged in November, and his prognosis is listed as, remember before it was poor, now it's grave.
Ooh, that's dang. That's not. I didn't even know that was a prognosis you could be given.
I didn't either until I was researching this. I was like, woof, that's real bad.
That sounds like the prognosis that you get from like Gandalf. Like, oh, I'm sorry, my son, it is grave. You will be one of Mordor soon.
So a condition of his discharge was that he had to attend the Santa Cruz medical health clinic. He was to attend groups, which he did sporadically, rarely. He did not attend like he was supposed to. So then he goes through a series of fads in the early 70s. He shaves his head. He went on a microbiotic diet, which I didn't even know was like a thing in the 70s.
I don't even know what that is.
A macrobiotic diet?
No.
So it's a diet where whole grains, local fresh veggies, sea veggies, and beans. You also eat seasonal fruits, nuts, seeds, and white fish 2 to 3 times per week. You don't eat meat or dairy or other animal products. Yeah. And it is a diet that became popular in the 70s. Huh. So learning new stuff.
Yeah.
So
I was thinking like the little food you get in those like play kitchens where
So not only did he shave his head and do the macrobiotic diet, he also lost weight. He then wore a black sombrero and faked a Mexican accent.
That's problematic.
So years after this, FBI profiler Robert Ressler would note that Herbert had paranoid schizophrenia that manifested as early as his senior year of high school. So Mr. Popular was showing signs of schizophrenia, but nobody picked up on it. In September of 1972, 25-year-old Herbert was now back at home again with his parents in Felton, and he'd stopped taking his meds, which we know is not a good thing.
Not a great sign.
So he was now hearing voices that were telling him that an earthquake was imminent, and the only way to save California was by human sacrifice. So we're going to go back to the beginning. Remember I told you his birthday, April 18th, and it was the anniversary of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake?
Yes.
So Herbert thought that this was extremely significant. He held the belief that the Vietnam War was actually preventing earthquakes due to the American death toll. The deaths were a sacrifice. The war began winding down, which meant so did the death sacrifices. So Herbert felt that he had to do something to prevent the earthquakes, which meant kill.
So for the good of the many at the expense of the few.
Of the few, yes. So on October 13th of 1972, Herbert Mullen comes across Lawrence Whitey White, a transient that was walking along windy Highway 9 in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Herbert stops. He pretends he's having car trouble. And then when Whitey, comes over to offer his assistance, Herbert beats him to death with a baseball bat. And then he leaves him on the side of the highway where he's discovered the next day. Herbert would at one point claim that he was Jonah from the Bible.
Okay.
He also thought that he received a telepathic message from Whitey saying, "Pick me and throw me over the boat. Kill me so that others will be saved."
It's quite the message to receive.
Yes. So on October 24th of 1972, Herbert found his next victim, Mary Guilfoyle. Mary was 24-year-old Cabrillo college student. she was actually running late for an interview and decided to hitchhike. Now, we've talked about this before, and I should mention this again. If you hear like hitchhiking or walking on the roads, things like that, in the 70s, that was just the thing they did.
Yeah, it was the 70s version of rideshare.
It really was. Like,
Yeah,
really.
You couldn't call an Uber. It was just like, I'll stick my thumb out and somebody will give me a ride.
Like, so many people hitchhiked in the 70s.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So Mary's running late. She decides to hitchhike. And, well, Herbert picks her up under the false pretense of giving her a ride. He then stabs her through the chest and back. And then I don't know what, okay, not that I get his whole I'm killing sacrifices for the earthquake, but he decides to take it even a step further and dissects her body. He then scattered her remains along a hillside road. Her body wasn't discovered until February, and her death was initially thought to be the work of co-ed killer Ed Kemper. The two were actually active during the same period of time. If you don't know Ed Kemper, I suggest watching season 1 of Mindhunter. Cameron Britt nails him. Cameron Britt's an amazing actor anyway. And if you watch that, there's also an interview with Kemper that's like really scary, but Ed nails him. Also, side note, Cameron Britt actually liked one of my tweets about him.
Oh,
so there's
that's
that.
Fun.
And it wasn't even about Mindhunter. It was about a whole different show. He's also on Umbrella Academy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
which one is he on Umbrella Academy?
He's one of the traveling bounty hunters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. So on November 2nd of 1972, Herbert goes to St. Mary's Catholic Church in Los Gatos to confess. Well, unfortunately, he was in the midst of a delusional state, and he was believing that he was volunteering to be a sacrifice, to fend off the earthquakes after confessing to Father Henri Tomé, a French resistance veteran from Marseille. He actually came to America after the war and was in his 8th year as an assistant pastor. So he believes the priest, after taking his confession, is like, okay, I want to be a sacrifice, so kill me. So he brutally beats, kicks, and stabs the priest. Father Tomé bled to death in the confessional. A parishioner actually witnessed Herbert fleeing the scene. He described Herbert as a tall young man in dark clothing and black boots. Sadly, that's not really enough to help police, who initially thought that the priest was murdered by a burglar who had lured him into the church, or he was possibly, they had possibly interrupted a burglar.
Right. Not a whole lot of info to go on there.
No. Mm-mm. So later that month, Herbert tries to get into the Coast Guard, but was rejected after failing the psychological exam. In December of 1972, Herbert purchases a .22 caliber ROM RG-14 revolver for $24 at the Western Auto Store in Felton after reading Einstein on Peace. He said
he picked up a gun at an auto shop?
Right?
It's like, I'm going to get my brakes changed, maybe some new wiper blades. Also, could I get that gun? Thank you.
I after seeing some of the combo stores I've seen between Kentucky and here, look, it's possible. It's possible.
No, it's definitely. I mean, you can. It's just a different areas, different rules.
Yep. So after reading Einstein on Peace, he felt he needed the gun because he was 1/3 Scandinavian. You see, the book states that in Switzerland, every adult male was in the military and had a gun for protection. So because he was 1/3 Scandinavian, even though he's not in Switzerland, nor did he really read that book properly, he needed the gun.
Right.
The book.
It's like, oh shoot, 1/3 of me should have a gun. I will only hold this with 2 fingers.
So the book itself, which is described as Einstein's letters and writings pertaining to the damages of war and the atom bomb and the need to strive for peace, Herbert like I said, missed the point.
Kind of missed the plot there.
Yeah. Plot twist. That's not really what it's about, Herbert. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. At Herbert's trial, the store owner, Anthony Black, described Herbert as clean cut, clean shaven, and cleanly dressed. Anthony testified that Herbert said the gun was for target practice. In early January of 1973, Herbert tried to join the U.S. Marines. Get this. Now remember, he tried to join the Coast Guard, but failed the psychological exam. But he passed it for the Marines. The only reason he didn't get in is because he passed the physical and the psychological exams. He failed the drug test.
Yeah, I'll do it.
He also refused to have his criminal records released. But I think it's so funny that he failed for the Coast Guard, but passed for the Marines. So, being former Army myself, I feel I have every right to make fun of the Marines for that one.
Yeah. I'm gonna stay out of the conversation, being not even Salvation Army.
So the once conscientious observer was released from military service. Like I said, Marines, you missed the mark on that one.
Maybe they were looking for something different than the Coast Guard was.
Herbert tells his parents he's going to try the Army, but no. No word on if it really happened, but I'm going to say probably no. So on January 25th, Herbert decides that he's ready for his next sacrifice or victim, you know. Yeah. The next person...
Must appease the fault lines.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the next person is Jim Gianera. Now, do you remember earlier we mentioned Jim? He gave Herbert his first taste of the Mary Jane, the Mary Joanna.
Yeah, way back when.
Mm-hmm. So Herbert goes to Jim's house and he finds that, well, Jim's moved. The cabin that Jim once lived in on Mystery Spot Road was now the home of Kathy Francis, an old friend of Jim's and her family. So for whatever reason, I don't understand. I don't know what reason Kathy gave Herbert. I mean, I don't understand the reasoning of why Kathy gave Herbert the address, but she did. Yeah. She gives Herbert Jim's new address in Santa Cruz. Herbert then travels to the GNR's new residence and kills both Jim and his wife, Joan. He shoots them both and then stabs them repeatedly. Not finished with his day's activities, though. Herbert travels back to the Mystery Spot Road house, and which is now Kathy's house, where he shoots Kathy and her two sons, Damon Francis, who was 4, and David Hughes, who was 9. Kathy's husband was actually spared because he was away from the house. Initially, because it's always the spouse, the killings were attributed to Kathy's husband, who was a drug dealer. It was assumed that it was drug motivated.
Gotcha.
Of course, it turns out that it was Herbert because he didn't want her to be able to identify him, which is important. Hold on to that too.
Okay.
So about a month later, on February 6th, Herbert encounters 4 teen boys while wandering the grounds of Henry Cowell Redwood State Park, illegally camping. Herbert approaches the 4 boys, 18-year-old David Allen Oliker, 18-year-old Robert Michael Spector, 19-year-old Brian Scott Card, and 15-year-old Mark Joan Drebalas. He pretends to be a park ranger and speaks to them. He orders the boys to leave the park, telling them that they were polluting the forest. Now, even if he was a park ranger, you got 4 teenage boys. They're kind of rebellious at that age.
Yeah, not likely to listen to Deputy Park Ranger.
Right. So after they refuse, he claims Herbert claims that the boys communicated with him telepathically. He asked them to leave, and they replied yes, again, telepathically. Herbert fatally shot all 4 boys with his revolver. He stole $20 and a .22 caliber rifle and left them. The boys were discovered a week later. So we previously mentioned Mary Guilfoyle. Her body was discovered 6 days later after the boys on February 12th. Herbert's final murder happened February 13th. He was driving through the west side of Santa Cruz when he passed Fred Perez, a retired fisherman, outside weeding his yard. Fred lived on the corner of Lighthouse Avenue and Garkey Street. Herbert decided, yep, that's him. And he shoots him with a rifle, one single shot to the heart. He then climbed back into his car and drives away as if nothing happened. It just so happened that it was broad daylight and he shoots a man in a residential neighborhood. So there were plenty of witnesses. One of which was Fred's neighbor, John Stegano. John actually was quick enough to get Herbert's license plate, and he calls the police. Herbert's pulled over and captured a few minutes later at the intersection of Highway 9 and Coral Street. Of course, due to the events that had just happened, police expected a possible shootout with Herbert, but nothing. He surrendered peacefully and quietly. So on February 14th of 1973, there's a search of Herbert's apartment, and inside, police find a Bible, an address book with Jim Giannera's address listed, several newspaper articles about his recent murders, a rosary pouch that belonged to Father Tomei, and the book Einstein on Peace. While in custody, Herbert quickly confessed to his crimes, saying that he'd been told by voices in his head to kill people in order to prevent earthquakes. He also took credit for the fact that there hadn't been any recent earthquakes.
Well, you can't argue with him there. He's right. There hadn't been any earthquakes.
Not saying it's because of the sacrifices, but the Santa Cruz District Attorney's Office charged Herbert Mullen with 10 murders. He was not charged in Santa Cruz County for the murder of Lawrence White, Mary Guilfoyle, and Father Tomei. His trial began on July 30th of 1973, and he admitted to all of the murders. So the trial focused on whether or not he was sane and culpable for his actions. He tried to claim insanity. His defense used his history of mental illness and his diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. During the trial, Herbert stated that he heard voices that told him to commit human sacrifices to prevent earthquakes in California. He called the messages his die songs. The prosecutor, however, Christopher Cottle, highlighted, no, man, you premeditated this quite a bit. You thought you were covering your tracks in the murders of Jim Giannera and Joan and Kathy Francis and family because you went back and killed Kathy because she could ID you. That's premeditation, dude. Come on, my guy. On August 19th of 1973, Herbert's found guilty of first-degree murder in the cases of Jim Giannera and Kathy Francis because they were premeditated. Because he could have, even if he had gone to the house, let's say he'd gone to the house, he didn't kill Kathy, but he was looking for Jim. He still had time to turn around and not go after Jim at the new place.
Yeah.
The remaining 8 murders, he was found guilty of second-degree murder because they were impulsive. The Santa Clara District Attorney's Office charged Herbert for the murders of Father Henri Tomei, and on December 11th of 1973, the day his trial was set to begin, he pled guilty to second-degree murder. Herbert was sentenced to life in prison in the Santa Cruz trial. He's been denied parole at least 8 times since 1980. He's currently incarcerated at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. He is noted to have interactions with Edward Kemper, the co-ed killer that we previously mentioned. The two at one time shared adjoining cells at the California Medical Facility. Kemper accused Mullen of stealing his dump sites. Ed recalled, quote, "Well, he had a habit of singing and bothering people when somebody tried to watch TV, so I threw water on him to shut him up. Then when he was a good boy, I'd give him some peanuts. Herbie liked peanuts. That was effective because pretty soon he asked permission to sing. That's called behavior modification treatment. Ed freaking Kemper is talking about modifying the behavior of Herbert Mullen.
Jail sounds like a scary place. But they got peanuts.
But they got peanuts.
Probably not anymore because you could be allergic.
So according to his website, Herbert's website, which was updated sometime before March 18th of 2020 or 2021, it says his next parole hearing was set for March 18th of 2021. According to an article in CBS's San Francisco site, he was denied parole. Some references to Herbert in pop culture. Andy E. Horn played Herbert it was actually Herbert McCormick, in the 2008 direct-to-video horror film Kemper, the Co-Ed Killer. So, of course, it's about their interaction or their paths crossing.
Yeah.
Herbert was the subject of an episode of the docuseries Born to Kill. He's also mentioned multiple times on Criminal Minds, both directly and indirectly. He inspires a character. Herbert was alluded to in the Church of Misery song by Megalomania from the album Master of Brutality. Herbert was known to water his doormat every day. Herbert says...
Is that a metaphor?
No, he would actually water his doormat.
Interesting.
Yeah. Do you water your doormat? Because if so,
I don't even have a doormat. Okay. I mean, I don't even know if that was the thing I was supposed to have.
All right. Okay. Herbert has been quoted as saying, "We human beings, through the history of the world, have prevented our continent from cataclysms by murder. In other words, a minor natural disaster avoids a major natural disaster."
Wow.
And there you go.
So in a really creepy way, this guy had the Thanos ethos down.
Yes.
It's like we gotta get rid of half the universe so we can save the whole thing.
He snapped his fingers, in essence.
Yeah.
To save California from the earthquakes. There you go.
I love how he pointed out, yeah, but there haven't been any, right? Like, oh,
right.
Okay.
That's because nature, my guy, but sure.
Yeah. Oof.
But there you go. That's the story of Herbert Mullin.
Well, I'm glad he's still in jail. The weird thing is, on a very strange possibility, because he's got a website, he could potentially listen to this at some point.
It's true.
That's weird. It's weird to think about. A lot of our subjects on the B side are not potential audience members, so that's a creepy moment.
And if he hears this, yeah, you didn't prevent any earthquakes. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's not how earthquake works.
No. Mm-mm.
I mean, I'm no seismologist, but I have seen lots of disaster movies, and I'm pretty sure that's not how it works.
It's called science. But, who am I? That's it. That's the B-side.
All right. So, B-side, as always, takes us a darker path. It takes Adam a second to come back from the darkness sometimes. But that is this entire month of October is always a rough month for me from a mental standpoint. It starts to get darker. The weather changes. And there's a lot of scary imagery. And we've talked many times, Brooke, you know that I am not a scary movie person. But I am trying to broaden my horizons this year and embrace Halloween and this time the spooky season, as it has been rebranded this year, more than I have in the past. I actually tonight am going to volunteer at the Twin Cities Horror Festival, which is here in the Twin Cities. It's a theater and film festival. A friend of mine is involved with running it, and I'm going to be selling tickets at the door to tonight's theater performances. I'm super excited to go to a theater performance for the first time since after COVID. But it's part of my whole goal to embrace the spooky season. And that's why this year I am going full bore into costumes.
Ooh.
I I have at work at the restaurant, they have given us permission that we can wear costumes on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I have a costume for Friday, a costume for Saturday, and a different costume for Sunday. And I'm going all out. I've been purchasing things on Amazon, and I did it early enough this year that everything has arrived, and I'm good to go with all the accessories and costume pieces. There will be different facial hair and haircuts for each costume. So really putting in as much effort as I ever have. I mean, I've not been a Halloween costume person, even as a kid. Brooke, did you dress up a lot when you were a kid? Do the whole neighborhood?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Can you remember like your favorite childhood costumes?
I think like being a witch or something.
Yeah, witch classic. Yeah, to go.
Yeah.
I actually only can remember. I think I've only had like 2 Halloween costumes from birth in 1981 until probably about 3 years ago. I had a grand total of maybe 2, maybe 3 costumes I wore. I was a Ninja Turtle in the early or late 80s, but I didn't like because it was one of those plastic masks, with the aisles, and it was bothering me. So I took that off and I painted my face and just told everybody that I was the 5th turtle, whose name was Picasso. And that's why I wasn't wearing my mask. And then in 1991, there was the Great Halloween Blizzard, which, if you've ever talked to anyone in Minnesota about snowfall and the fall, they will mention the Halloween blizzard. It snowed like 3 feet of snow, and everyone was trick-or-treating in this giant snowstorm, and school got called off the next day. I did not have a costume that day. I was in, I think, 5th grade at the time, 5th or 6th grade at the time. And I hadn't planned on going out trick-or-treating because I was too old. It was too cool for it. But then when it was snowing and everybody wanted to go out, and my little brother had a costume, and we were staying over at a friend's house and they had costumes, my costume was the Abominable Snowman. And I would walk right before we walked up to each door, I would dive into a snowbank and get as much snow on me as possible, and then walk up to the door and tell them that was my costume. I thought it was pretty ingenious, and I was very proud of myself for being so clever. I just looked like a kid who kept falling into snowbanks, which was kind of ridiculous. We had a foreign exchange.
And how cold were you?
I was so cold. It was such a poor choice. I did not make good decisions at that time. We had a foreign exchange student living with us at that time, that fall, whose name was Ricardo, and it was the first time that he had ever seen snow. He's from Guatemala, and he thought that every snowfall was going to be 3 feet tall, and he was very overwhelmed. But it was sort of a rude awakening that it's like generational snowfall. So those are literally the only 2 costumes that I can remember wearing for Halloween until a couple of years ago when I was working at a company that promoted and had costume contests. And so I started getting into it, and Brooke, I've sent you a couple photos that we'll share with our on our Facebook stuff. But I started really getting into costumes, and so I've got my 3 for this year. But as I'm getting ready over the last couple of months and buying my stuff on Amazon and making sure I've got all the accessories, I've really been thinking about costumes and how just a little bit a hat here or a piece of jewelry or something can make a big difference in how you feel when you're dressing up. And so much of that goes back to Hollywood and how costumes can completely change a performance or a role or a movie or even a TV show. And so today, we're going to talk about some of my favorite costumes and or like physical transformations that have happened in film. So one of the links I sent you, Brooke, that we'll post on the webpage is actually a very fun ranking of every Batman costume in film ever. And so we could do an entire A-side on that, but instead of focusing just on Batman, we'll have that list available on the website so you can check out, and we'll look at some other ones as well. So I wanted to get away from too many of the superheroes, because you could literally argue about Batman costumes, whether you're dealing with nipples or no nipples, and how they are treated for an entire episode. But one of my favorite transformations, it goes back to another Batman movie, and it's from 1992's Batman Returns, which we've mentioned several times on the A side in the past. And it, of course, is how they changed the character of the Penguin from just this guy in a tuxedo who's a crime boss to this Stewart Penguin as played by Danny DeVito, and multiple, hues of makeup and nose shapes, and how the suit that he wears is just sort of a grotesque human that's transformed into this, penguin-like shape. It is one of my favorite transformations because at the time I always thought of Danny DeVito as the other guy from Twins.
Oh yeah.
So I'm thinking of that guy. And Cheers, or no, Taxi and Cheers, and just, like all sorts of comedy roles. But he was so different in Batman Returns. And to this day, I don't immediately think of Danny DeVito. I immediately think of the Penguin as this grotesque and scary character. And it was an incredibly well done creation. I did not realize that it took them 4.5 hours to get him into the costume and get all the makeup on and to transform Danny DeVito into the Penguin, because it doesn't look like, it's not a ton of prosthetics. It's not super over the top. It's very humanoid. It still looks like a person, but 4.5 hours for him to transform into the Penguin. Of course, comic book movies are a great source of costumes. One of my favorite comic books series that I've read all time is Hellboy, which came out from Dark Horse Comics. And if you've ever had a chance to kind of go back and read any of the Bureau for Paranormal Research comics with the Hellboy, they're all really good. And there have been 2 pretty decent movies, well, 3 technical movies, 2 different Hellboys. Ron Perlman played Hellboy in the early 2000s versions after playing Beast in the 1988 Beauty and the Beast TV series, which is highly underrated. Also has Linda Hamilton as it. And it was made into like a CW version, which wasn't horrible, but the 80s version is preferable. He plays an excellent Hellboy. It took him 4 hours of getting into costume made of red latex, and with that character, you could, there's only so much you could do with makeup. You've got to have the red hand of doom that has to be made out of latex. But one of my favorite ones, and of course, David Harbour was Hellboy a couple years ago in the remake, which I thought was quite good and a little scarier and a little bit more of the dark side, and stuck more with the original comic book material, but did not get a sequel so far. Of course, you cannot think of late 90s comic book movies without X-Men and the amazing performance of Rebecca Romijn as Mystique, where it would take over 100 silicone prosthetics, body paint, 4 different makeup artists, and 9 hours to get into costume for her role in X-Men and X-Men 2. Evidently, they figured out the whole process a little bit better, and for X-Men 2, it only took her 6 hours to get into costume. So they cut 4 hours off of the application time. But I remember seeing that the trailer for that movie in the late 90s as a teenager and just being blown away that they were going to have basically, Mystique running around in blue body paint the entire time with all of the prosthetics, and how amazing it looked. And the graphics were pretty good for all of the shape shifting as well. One that I had forgotten about that ties in with the X-Men movies, in a movie that I've really only seen once and didn't love all that much, but completely forgot who played the main villain. But in X-Men Apocalypse, the big bad Apocalypse himself is actually played by Oscar Isaac, which I had completely forgotten. It is not a super memorable movie, but it was before Oscar Isaac was as household name as he is. Of course, he's in the new Dune movie. There is the show Scenes from Marriage that has just recently come out. He, of course, had his huge starring role in the Star Wars franchise. But this was before he was quite the recognizable name and face. Playing X-Men, it was a movie, but I totally couldn't recognize Oscar Isaac. Another one that is impossible to recognize except for his voice, which has an iconic voice, is Idris Elba, who in Star Trek Beyond, and spoiler alert, plays a Star Trek captain who is mutated into an alien named Krall, and there is a ton of makeup and prosthetics on him. You would have no idea that it is Idris Elba unless you heard his voice, which is so distinctive. Another character from comics that changed when it got to film. I remember back in the days leading up to Batman The Dark Knight, how everyone was really surprised and concerned that anyone was going to try to take on the Joker after the incredible performance by Jack Nicholson in the original Batman from 1988. No one would even dare try it, but they went an entirely different route. And I remember when he was cast being really surprised that Heath Ledger was going to be inhabiting the Joker. But
a lot of people were.
Yeah, it was not expected. He took it an entirely different way. They took the character and just through how they created them, the classic makeup and the grin and the little things that they did about the costume and the hair that made it, just took little tweaks on it that made it an entirely different character. I mean, you can't even look at the two Jokers and feel like they're, you know, the same sides of the coin. And even then moving on to what happened with Joaquin Phoenix in the Joker here a couple of years ago. Yeah. You've got such an iconic character and three so distinctly different versions of it that is really interesting. This one is pure CGI, but it caught me by surprise because I did not know it, and I was curious if you knew this, Brooke. But in the movie I, Robot, of course, the Will Smith film, one of the robots, I believe this is like the main one in the movie, is the voiced and the CGI capture was Alan Tudyk.
Yes, because they are good friends because of that movie.
I had no idea. I had totally overlooked that because that was years ago. But one of my Halloween costumes, the Friday Halloween costume, is inspired by Firefly. It's a character from Firefly. It's not Wash, but it is another one. So I thought that was a neat little connection. It's not just action and superhero movies where huge costumes and physical changes are important. Often in comedy, the costume changes can be a great way to set up jokes or to create a awkward situation or create a character that can be played by someone who is incredibly beautiful, but does not look beautiful in the movie, like Emma Thompson in Nanny McPhee.
Oh my gosh, yes.
She looks nothing
at all.
At all. That is an incredible transformation. It is a great job by the filmmakers and also by Miss Thompson to create a character. Because I remember thinking, there's no way. Like, what? She's good. That's not Emma Thompson. There's just no way that's Emma Thompson. It's not going to happen. Another one, of course, that people actually went to the theater, watched the whole movie, and didn't realize it was that actor, and it was unexpected for the type of film it was and the actor it was Tom Cruise's portrayal in Tropic Thunder, where he plays the greedy, overweight, balding, ruthless Hollywood producer Les Grossman, who is just completely over the top. And I think I read somewhere that like Tom Cruise filmed all of his scenes for that movie in like less than a week. It was, not a huge time commitment for him, but looks nothing like it. And in a way, it was at a time when Tom Cruise seemed to take himself very seriously. So doing that role was a big surprise.
Yeah,
kind of blew people away that he would go that over the top. Of course, cross-dressing in comedies is very common. If we go all the way back to Some Like It Hot, but you've got recently John Travolta put on a ton of prosthetics and gained weight, and also a fat suit to play Edna in Hairspray.
Yes.
Which I did not see coming. And of course, maybe the most famous cross-dressing comedy ever, besides Bosom Buddies, which was the TV show in the late 80s with Tom Cruise, would be Mrs. Doubtfire.
Rest in peace to Peter.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that too. But Mrs. Doubtfire with Robin Williams, where even the character himself is cross-dressing and trying to play two roles throughout the film. But I remember seeing as a kid, just being like, wow, that is an amazing amount of prosthetics and things, because it's very believable that you would think, well, these kids could totally be fooled. And maybe even the ex-wife could be fooled, or the estranged wife at that point could be fooled that this isn't. He went 8 separate stages to transform into Mrs. Doubtfire.
Wow.
So it was not nearly as quick as they made it seem in the film. Like when he sticks his face in the pie and he's just got the mask on. 8 different stages of makeup to get into the role.
Wow.
And costumes are not just for action movies and comedies. They also pop up in award-winning performances. Of course, we've got 1985's drama Mask with Eric Stoltz and Cher, where he takes on an entirely different look. There were 3 different giant pieces of latex foam applied to Eric Stoltz's face and then blended with makeup. And then he had dentures to simulate his teeth as well. Cameron Diaz went through a very different look in Being John Malkovich, where the traditionally glamorous blonde Cameron Diaz has dark hair, frizzy, wearing frumpy sweaters, as the pet fanatic who ends up trying out the portal into John Malkovich's mind, which is just, I always forget that movie, and then it pops back up, and it's just like, it's so interesting and so good, but also it blows me away every time I think of it that it got made.
Right.
Like at no point somebody was like, no, we can't do this. This is too weird. They were like, yeah, let's do it.
They'll love it.
Yeah. Tom Hanks has transformed for a lot of his roles, but maybe none as dramatically as in Castaway.
Yeah.
He lost 55 pounds to play the role. He had a strenuous diet and exercise regime and wasn't allowed to shave or cut his hair for weeks to get the emancipated and wild look for the Castaway. But perhaps the biggest transformation, and the one that resulted in Oscar Gold, came for Charlize Theron in Monster, where if you have seen the movie, and Monster, of course, is a true crime story that could very easily show up on the B-side. She took a break from being her normal, just world stopping beauty and transformed into a monster, basically. She put on weight to play serial killer Aileen Wuornos. She ate donuts to pack on 30 pounds, had her eyebrows completely plucked out and her hair thinned. She had latex added onto her face and wore dentures over her real teeth. It, even with side-by-side photos, does not remotely look like the same person.
No.
It is an incredible transformation and an incredible performance. It is not an uplifting movie, so do not watch it if you are looking for a good afternoon. But it is an incredible performance, and if you've not seen it, highly recommend Monster, not only for the transformation, but for the performance as well. And she will, of course, go on to win a Best Oscar for that role.
Spoiler.
And then, yeah, spoiler alert, it's really good. And then finally, entering, I want to finish with one actor who almost in every one of his roles involves makeup or transformation or playing some sort of otherworldly character. And it's funny because in my brain, I have what I believe is now a false memory, but for some reason, I have this false memory of Brooke, you and I, when we were on radio together,
Mhm.
interviewing this gentleman.
We did.
Did we? Is that real?
Yes.
Okay, because I had myself convinced it was not real. Because for some reason, I thought that it was somebody else, but it was. So was he in Jeepers Creepers?
No, that was no. Maybe were you not there for the interview? It was over the phone.
It was over the phone. Maybe I wasn't there for it. Maybe I heard it later.
Okay.
But of course, it's funny because we're talking like we know what we're talking about, and anybody else is like, "What the hell are you guys talking about?" So this gentleman has played the Pale Man in Pan's Labyrinth, Billy in Hocus Pocus, Abe Sapien in the Hellboy we mentioned, the Amphibian Man in The Shape of Water, and he's currently Saru on Star Trek Discovery, and that is actor Doug Jones, who at a very lean 6'3", is constantly being used for otherworldly characters and is incredible in every single one of them. Whether
and
it's
one of the nicest guys, like so sweet.
Yeah, I was totally there for it. I remember talking to him, and I thought I'd convinced myself that it didn't happen. But I'm glad to hear you say that.
Jonathan Breck is the creeper, and we did talk to him too.
Okay, so we talked to both of them.
Mm-hmm. And that's another amazing transformation, because Jonathan Breck, like back then, especially now, he's a little older or whatever. He's still good looking, but like, I think he used to be like a model.
Yeah.
And then he transformed into the creeper.
So Doug Jones gets a special recognition for virtually every single one of his roles that he's ever played. Involves prosthetics or makeups or CGI or a lot going on. So
has he ever played a role as himself?
I feel like, let me see if I can pull it up here. I feel like he has, but there were ones where he's more obviously himself, like some roles where he's not in as much.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one, because he was Abe Sapien, Hellboy. Oh yeah, like he's played like a president once and a headmaster. Like he's played roles where he's not obviously in makeup and stuff, but it's one-offs on TV shows.
Right.
Nothing that where he was a real starring role as himself.
Okay.
So he gets the final word as the ultimate actor for costumes. And usually this is where on the A side where I say, like, you can find this movie here and you can find that movie there. But instead, this week we have a very different call to action. So I've already sent Brooke some Halloween photos from the last couple of years, and I will be posting and tagging the A side, B side on my costumes for this weekend. So my challenge is that everyone should share their Halloween costumes this weekend, what they're wearing out, whether it's a family costume with the kids or it's one that you're wearing out to a party or you've got a contest at work like I do. Make sure that you share them with A Side, B Side podcast and give us permission to share them as well. And we will all be able to check out everybody's awesome costumes for the weekend.
That'd be so fun.
Yeah.
Well, awesome.
Like, I think knowing our audience, that we're going to have some really good ones out there. So I'm excited.
I think so too. I think so too. I don't think that they're dressing up at my job. If they are, well, tomorrow is the last day and nobody's told me. So I could possibly go into work and everybody else is dressed up and I am not, which I would be a little bummed about, but it's life.
Well, I mean, you could just do the, if you got cat ears, you're good.
Yeah, there you go.
Toss on cat ears and it's a costume.
All right. Well, so is that the A side?
That is the A side.
Awesome. Well, thanks to we had goodness gracious, we had some support on our website with some merch. So thank you for that. That was pretty awesome. Always awesome. If you would like to support the podcast through merch, you can do that. Adam.
A side, B side podcast.square.site.
Mm-hmm. Also, you can help by liking, sharing, subscribing, telling us where you're listening, sharing with your friends. We're on Apple, on iTunes. We're also on Spotify. We're on Stitcher. Pretty much anywhere that you can stream, we're there. So we would love for you to share us. And on YouTube, you can you can follow, you can subscribe, you can do all that stuff as well.
Facebook, Instagram, all that.
Yeah,
all that jazz.
If you have a story or a movie or that guy / that girl from that show, send it on over. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can email A-Side, B-Side podcasts. Make sure you get the S in there at gmail.com. Well, I think that's it. That's another episode, Adam.
Well, thank you, Brooke.
Thanks.